right, and good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Wall Dropping History. Why is my webcam? There we go. Thank you for joining on this episode of Wall Dropping History. I am so glad you could show up today. Thank you for your dedication to your education. So today we're talking about a really interesting topic, but before I do that, let me go ahead and get to the agenda stuff real fast, the house cleaning. So Monday we had our class meeting, went over grades, all that stuff. Tuesday we talked about the greatest explorer in history, so you can go back and see that. Wednesday, on Pandemic Wednesday, we learned about polio. Okay, so you check out the Wednesday edition. Today we're learning about the Battle of Thermopylae, okay, and what that's all about. And tomorrow we're doing the culture of Africa. Let me also go ahead and give some shout-outs. Anybody's in the comment section that's commented so far. Thank you for joining us, Quinn, to Riley, Jayla, Ashley, Patrick, and Kiera. Thank you so much for showing up. Anybody else that is here today, go ahead and say hi in the chat, comment, or comment in the chat, live chat, and I will give you your shout-out. So again, thank you so much for showing up today. For those that have not done so, today is the last day to do it. Make sure you go ahead and submit to me in my email. Just use your phone or whatever you want to do. Just a quick little shout out. Let me know what you have been doing during the pandemic, so that way I can share it and kind of let everybody know that, you know, we're all kind of going through this together, and how other people have been handling it. Let us see some faces to go with some of the people that we've missed seeing in school. So make sure you have that submitted today so I can put it on the live stream for tomorrow. Okay, so that is going to do it for the housekeeping stuff. Today we're going to learn about the Battle of Thermopylae. Now, you have probably not heard it called that. For those that like watching a lot of movies and stuff like that, you probably heard it called the 300. So if you ever watched the movie 300, you kind of already have. And let me say this. The movie 300 is horribly inaccurate in a few ways. There's a few things. We're going to talk about the ways in which it was horrifically inaccurate. What it did get correctly, though, was the attitude, the confidence, the vibrato, if you will, of the Spartans, right? And so that's what we're talking about today. Basically, this is the greatest story of the Spartan culture, right? So there's a lot of things it did get right. It talks a lot, and we're going to talk about some more of the things that got right, but it talks about some, and by the way, thank you for joining us, Davius. But it talks a lot about, like, I want you, if you ever get a chance to watch it, to think about the way the Spartans acted, right? In fact, you'll see some of the quotes that we got from Herodotus and from Plutarch's The Lives make it into the movie. And I'm going to show it later on, but when he was sitting there saying, there's a part where they unleashed the arrows on the Spartans. It was quoted that the Spartans said, well, that's fine, we'll just fight in the shade. Just their cockiness, their confidence. So that part is accurate. So if you want to see a good movie, I can't really recommend it in that I can't be recommended rated R movies, and it's a hard R. But when you are 18 years old and you have the opportunity to go back and watch historical movies, there's a lot of good stuff in there. So we're going to talk about what they got right, what they got wrong, and kind of a little of the background leading up to the movie 300, right? What is going on leading up to it. All right, so to start off with, we have to talk about where we get our information from. And by the way, thank you for joining us, Rachel. It all starts with a guy named Herodotus. Okay, and you can see this bust of him right here. He was a Greek historian, and he provides most of the primary source for what happened at this battle. Now, this battle is also confirmed by the Persians, and it will later be written about in a book that makes up a large chunk of our knowledge of Roman and Greek knowledge, and that's called Plutarch's The Lives. So we have several sources for this, but this is our primary source, right? He's the kind of guy that follows along and chronicles what's going on at this battle. Now, he's widely considered the first writer to have treated historical subjects using a method known as the systematic investigation, right? So not only does he provide his own primary sources, He would be the guy that would be on the ground getting other first-hand accounts, right? He's not just jotting down what he sees. He's going to go and do like that, and today we think of it as common nature, right? Like we go, and I've had y'all do this, investigate multiple primary sources and try to piecemeal together what happened. And that's going to be the first time we see that applied to history, right? So, what might still be the problem with this story, right? And I want you to think back to that when we talked about the dawn of civilization, the thing where I talked about the historian's perspective, and think about it from the aspect of, you remember I talked about it as almost like somebody who is trying to read, right? There's a happy medium. If you've got a book, you want it about this close to your face, right? What happens if you get that book too far away? Well, you can read their words on it, but you can't really make out the nuance of what is being written. If you get a book too close to your face, you can read words, but it's hard to read sentences, and it's harder to read because it's too in your face, right? You're having to use your peripheral vision to read, and it's kind of like that, right? Now, Herodotus is getting his primary sources, right? But in the moment, he is kind of attempting to read this way, right? He's the first guy that he's reading a book this way and a book this way to get that first-hand account. But he does not have the knowledge of how it's going to be viewed hundreds of years later, and he doesn't have a good working knowledge of how everything is built up to that. Yeah, it's hard to gauge he's not working with the same tools we have today, right? He can't get online and use Google to search thousands of primary sources, right? So he's kind of the grandfather of attempting to look at things the right way, if you will. But we're still going to have issues, right? I want to point out this too. There's a true saying that is true throughout history, which is history is written by the victors, right? So obviously he's not getting the first-hand account of how the Spartans saw this all shake out, right? So that's going to be an issue too. So let's talk first. We got to understand the players involved, right? So the first player we're going to talk about is Sparta. Now Sparta is a Greek city-state, right? You can see it right here. This is where Sparta is. The capital is going to be Athens, if you will. But these are all kind of like self-contained city-state kingdoms, right? So Sparta would feel like they have a king, and sometimes they would fight Athens, right? They did not consider Athens part of the same country, if you will. However, if let's say the Persians had started conquering Greece, well, they first saw themselves as Greeks, right? So they may not always get along, but they're loyal to each other as the Greeks are, right? So they would kind of team up and fight this foreign invader. And that was very common in their era. And Sparta's not really looking to destroy Athens, and Athens would never be looking to just wipe out the Spartans. They may want to rule over each other or prove their dominance, but they're not looking to wipe each other out, right? They have that shared common religion and philosophies and stuff like that, right? So it's kind of like the question I ask is, why would they work together to defend Greece? And the thing that I kind of think about is, to kind of give you that example is, you can think about a lot of countries that we don't get along with, right? Like we don't necessarily get along with North Korea, for example. We don't get along with Russia, or we have not throughout history, right? There's lots of countries we have not gotten along with. However, let's say for tomorrow, aliens showed up, right? We're talking Independence Day aliens. If they showed up tomorrow, how do you think all the countries would get together, right? And I often think, like, we may have beef with, say, Iran. We may have beef with Cuba. But if all of a sudden aliens showed up tomorrow, you best believe we would put all those differences aside, and it's like, well, I don't care if you're Iranian, I don't care if you're North Korean, you're a human, right? And these aliens are trying to conquer everybody. So, number one and first and foremost, let's get rid of the aliens, right? So a common goal can often bring people together. COVID-19 is a great example, right? We're all having to do our part, well, at least we should be, do our part to practice social distancing, so on and so forth. So it's sort of like in that wheelhouse. Now, Spartan is a very different societal culture than what you would imagine, right? A lot of what they do, you would say, this is horrifically barbaric. Sparta believed that it was their job to breed nothing but warriors, right? For the women, their goal was to pass on the best genetics possible, right? So a perfect Spartan woman would be somebody who was tall and strong. You know, their women would work out nonstop. Now, their women weren't warriors, and we're going to talk about the women in just a second. But it's all about passing on the best genetics. If your child is born with inferior genetics, they would literally and this is not inaccurate, they would toss your child into basically a pit of dead baby bodies and just let the baby starve to death, assuming it survived the fall. So their goal was, you passed on supreme genetics. So like, if your child's born with asthma, it's off into the pit. Something like that. I think about my brother, right? My brother being in a wheelchair. It's 7 years old. He's in a wheelchair. It's off into the pit with him, right? They did not want to pass on. This is kind of like humans choosing to do selective breeding to breed the ultimate male warrior children, right? It sounds horrible by today's standards. But they thought that's the way it has to do, right? Yeah, and we're going to talk about it in a second. So, I'm glad you could join us, Noel. Keep that in mind. Thank you for joining us, Patrick, too. So, at the age of 7, Spartan boys began a rigorous city-state sponsored education. Their education is focused on training them to be the ultimate warriors. And by the way, they did train in the nude. So these young boys would wrestle and train in archery and combat, all in the nude, right? This system emphasized duty and discipline and endurance, right? It was nonstop. How fast can you run? How long can you run? How long can you fight? Yeah, by the way, thank you for saying that. Drop a like, and obviously if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. Anything to promote the channel, I appreciate that. So why do you think Spartans treated children that way? Yeah. You think about it today in Americans' culture. I can't imagine having a class full of little 9-year-old children wrestling in the nude, but you got to realize, like, this is Spartan culture, right? Like, they were all about getting back to the ruggedness of mankind, the survival of the fittest, and so it was all about that, right? It was nonstop training. Like today we learn social studies, English, math, science, right? Them it was, forget all that mess. You learn sword combat, archery, wrestling, strength training, endurance, so on and so forth. And let me tell you, that's going to come into play. That is really going to come into play, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But why do you think they treated children in that way? And one of the things I want you to understand is, just in case war comes. Look, and I want to comment on what Noel said, right? It's not just in case war comes. Oh, it's coming, right? They're going to make sure it comes. Spartans live for war. And let me talk a little bit about their religion. They believed that you achieved ultimate glory by dying in combat, right? I kind of think about Klingons in Star Trek, and I'm getting extra level nerdy on you. But, for you to get honor in the afterlife, you had to fight and die for your country. So it ain't just that they're preparing for war, they're looking for it, right? They want war coming. They're going to make sure at some point in time they have the means to fight and die to achieve glory in battle, right? Now, Spartan women. Now, although Spartan women were not active in the military, they were educated and enjoyed way more freedom than at any other point really in history and than any other place in Greece. They were constantly trained in physical combat, and they would actually have competitions, javelin tossing, wrestling, so on and so forth. And yeah, they would wrestle in the nude too. Their job was to produce the strongest children they could. In fact, and I tried to show the clip, but there's too much nudity and graphic language. But there's if you watch the scene where they talk about Spartan women, it's great how they talk about it. It's fantastic how they refer to it. But man, these Spartan women, they were headstrong, they were independent, You did not mess with Spartan women. In fact, the average Spartan women, if they were allowed to serve in the military, would have been great military soldiers. They could own their own property. They did not do housework or child raising. That's not what they did. They trained for combat, even though they were not going to be in combat. They had slaves for all that stuff. So once they were married, they shaved their heads. That was their culture. So that's how you knew that a woman was married. They were very faithful for their husbands. They definitely believed in monogamy. But that's how you knew that a Spartan woman was taken. She would go ahead and shave her head. That's not for me. I'm not down with the shaved head look. But hey, look, to each their own. That's how Spartan men liked it. Let's see. They only wanted their best soldiers, right? K-poppers, thank you for joining us. They wanted their best of the best, right? So that's their whole thing, right? It's all about selective breeding. And by the way, that works. You know, if we get the strongest, most physically fit in society and we're to breed them together, well, we do that with dogs, right? We selectively breed dogs to get features we like. People in horse racing do this real bad with horses. They will selectively breed the strongest, fastest horses so that their horses can compete in the Kentucky Derby. So that is something we know that works, right? I would not want you to shave your head for me, Rachel. That's not for me. So why do you think the Spartan women were so respected? And keep in mind, these are tough women, right? Like, I wouldn't want to mess with a Spartan woman. I mean, you know, one of the things they did get right is you saw the movie 300, and let me show you the. I should have put this into it. Let me see if I can show this to you. Yeah, if you looked, when they cast the movie 300, they had a call out for hundreds of people to say, hey, we need to find anybody that has a six-pack to cast as an extra. Let me tell you, the average Spartan dude looked like he was sculpted. Here's the before and after of Gerald Butler to show you kind of how intense the training was. But yeah, they were all about perfect physical fitness, right? The average Spartan woman is running around with a six-pack, looking like somebody you would not want to be messing with. And by the way, they were independent, right? Like, you couldn't walk up and talk down to a Spartan woman. They would talk trash just like the men would. There's a part where the Persians are talking to a Spartan woman, and she's kind of making these kind of like derogatory comments of like, you know, you should come with me and be with these Persians, right? And the Spartan women are like, no, you can't handle Spartan women. And then, you know, they were asking, like, why do you have the women train so hard? And they're like, you know, well, we have to be in our physical fit condition because only Spartan women could carry Spartan babies in their wombs. You know, like all this, like, super vibrato talking. So, yeah, if you think about, like, the Beyonce, the Independent Woman song, it's like that's the theme of Spartan women, right? Yeah, these were tough ladies, right? So, because Spartan men were all professional soldiers, all manual labor is done by a slave class called the helots. Now, for the teenage boys, it was their job to show their leadership by basically being a police force called the Cryptia, whose their job was to terrorize the helot population and murder anybody that was troublemakers. So that's kind of how Spartan men got their training to be brutal killers, right? So like the average 17-year-old Spartan man is, after he's done training his whole life for combat, he would go out and he would be the guy that would beat and whip and, if he needed to, murder the slaves. And it's to desensitize them to violence, right? So sometimes they would actually combat these slaves just to try to get them, their children, so that when they, because that's a tough thing to do, right? So when you're in combat, it's hard to be mentally prepared to take life. And it's to kind of get them used to that of, yeah, I can just go out and take life, So why do you think they had slaves do all the work? Why not have the men do it? And I kind of spoiled this for you, but it's to get the men. First of all, obviously, to allow for the men to train nonstop, but it's also to get the men desensitized to violence, so that they're just used to it, right? So it's not a thing anymore. So yeah, I kind of spoiled that, but that's the basic premise of it, right? To get them used to that level of violence, the desensitizing to it. By the way, we do that with doctors too, right? That's why doctors have to do clinical trials and stuff like that, or not clinical trials, internships, because you don't want a doctor for the first time doing a surgery and their hands shaking, freaking out at all the blood, right? So it's kind of all that working together. So at the age of 20, Spartan men became full-time soldiers, and they would remain active duty until the age of 60. So, by 480, they were ruled by King Leonidas. A Spartan king was a Spartan soldier. I don't want you to think that King Leonidas, although I'm sure he had a really nice house, he's not just sitting there on some throne commanding, right? And when you see the movie 300, they do a great job. Look, King Leonidas is up in the front. He is the tip of the spear. He is the toughest, roughest dude they had, right? And he would be up there in the front on the Phalanx commanding the troops, right? And we're going to talk about this later. When it comes time for combat, yeah, he's giving the orders, but he is just one of the soldiers. He has to do his part. He has to fulfill his duty. He is like a brother in arms, right? I don't want to bury it. I'm going to let King Leonidas talk about it in just a second. Now, the Spartans' constant military drilling and discipline made the difference, right? They didn't just learn how to be the best physically fit they could in combat. They learned the best they could mentally in combat. When you think about birds all changing direction at the same time, that's kind of the way Spartans fought. It was like routine, right? Like they would all, and I'm going to show you this in just a second, but when they talk about the Phalanx, it is one of the greatest inventions of combat, right? This tactic that they would perfect is how to fight as one unit. And so they had the best battle formation, the best military training, the best coordination on the planet at the time. These tactical maneuvers. It is actually so effective that it's almost like as better methods come along, they refuse to give it up. So if you want me to, I could talk about Alexander and the Macedonians. But that's one of the reasons they wipe out the Spartans, because they refuse to give up this Phalanx. So I wanted you to hear, there's a great scene where he describes the Phalanx. Oh, man. Where he describes the Phalanx, and I wanted you to kind of hear it.
Forgive the captain. He's a good soldier. To make spear and shield and sword as much a part of me as my own beating heart. I will earn my father's armor.
That's King Leonidas talking to somebody who's deformed but wants to be in the battle.
Fine thrust.
I will kill many Persians.
Raise your shield.
Yeah, I think I might have to go with Noel. I think it would be the Mongols. Because they would never engage with the Spartans. Like, they'd never get off their horses, and they would never stop shooting arrows. And their arrows could penetrate their bronze armored
Father
shields.
should have told you how our Phalanx works. We fight as a single, impenetrable unit. That is the source of our strength. Each Spartan protects the man to his left, thigh to neck, with his shield. A single weak spot, and the Phalanx shatters. Thigh to neck, Ephialtes. I am sorry, my friend, but not all of us are angels.
And so I ask the question is, why is battle formation so important? But actually, let me go back to something Raby said. If you're talking about like it's out in an open field, and the Mongol can do whatever he wants, and the Spartan can do whatever he wants, I would put my money on a Mongol, right? However, let's say for example it's a cage match, right? You just put them both in a cage, so to speak. Oh, Spartan would tear them apart. I mean, and I'll tell you this: if you were to put anybody in a cage match, Spartan versus any other, the average Spartan, right, versus any other soldier in history, oh, my money's on the Spartan, right? I don't care if you're talking about samurais or ninjas or you fill in that blank, right? Like what Israeli commandos today, right? Because they were almost genetically bred for combat and trained from birth. And by the way, Mongols weren't great hand-to-hand combat guys, right? Like the average Mongol didn't even have a sword. So they would not do well in a cage match. So I guess that would be my thing to it is, give me the battle conditions, right? If the Mongol gets to keep his horse and he gets to ride around with his bow and arrow, my money's on the Mongol. If it's a cage match, we're talking MMA, he would probably rip the dude's head off. So that would be my kind of question is, give me the battle conditions. But that would play a huge part. So why is battle formation so important? And we're going to see why it's so important in just a second. But I'm curious why you think it is so important, particularly in this era. And Noel says, until they got wrecked by King Philip of Macedonia. So let me tell you this. The Macedonians, and I'll do a whole lesson on it if something y'all are interested in. I hate to be honest, but I think they would even beat Ip Man. Well, let me tell you this. Not if Ip Man is doing all the crazy stuff in the movie, but if you're talking about like Donnie Yen and you were to put him against the Spartans back then, he's not big enough, strong enough, fast enough. And he's super fast, right? But like, they would be training in bloodthirsty combat from a small child. The endurance level, like, and this is kind of going a little off topic, but if you've ever boxed, or, I know Raby said he boxed. If you've ever boxed, it's exhausting, right? To be able to keep up that level of brutality, it's really tough. And the Spartans, they could just, and we're going to talk about, man, it's like they were machines. They could just fight nonstop at a high level. But one of the things Philip of Macedonia would do is he's going to come up with, and if y'all want me to do a lesson, I'll be happy to do one. I actually know a lot about Philip of Macedonia. And of course, obviously, his son, Alexander the Great. But he actually comes up with a new battle tactic called the maniple, which kind of tears into the Phalanx. It's kind of like the Phalanx killer. And so it's really that battle tactic. Who do you think had better war tactics? Oh, man, the Mongols. And they are like, keep in mind too, the Mongols have another 1,300 years to perfect war, right? But the Mongols are like playing chess, wire bounces, playing checkers. They're actually going to use, and we're going to talk about it in just a second, they're going to use some of the Spartans' battle techniques, right? We're going to talk about the feigned retreat. They use a lot of that. So as far as battle tactics, I'm definitely riding with the Mongols. I would take Genghis Khan with an army over King Leonidas with an army. If we're just talking about conventional warfare. Let's see. It's great for defense. Yeah, it's using defense to make a strong offense. Absolutely. Do you think the Mongols have better protection? Mongols? Yeah, let's see. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, if you have any other questions, I don't mind getting off topic. But he would prefer... Okay, so... Noel says King Philip didn't develop the maniple system, and neither did Alexander, but he would perfect it. He's going to actually come up with a weapon called the Circe, which is kind of like the Spartan spear, but it breaks a half in the back of it, and it's much longer. I'm sorry, not in half, in the middle of it, so that when they would chunk their spears, even if you blocked it with a shield, you got this giant spear stuck into it, and it would break apart so that the Spartan couldn't pull it out and then use it themselves. It was really a genius tactic. So he didn't invent the maniple, but he did perfect it, and he did perfect the Circe. So he was really ahead of his time as far as using conventional warfare. And I tell you, had the Spartans adapted, I think they would have held off King Philip, but they were hell bent to stay with the Phalanx. So, no soldier was considered, and this is in the Spartan Army, no soldier was considered superior to another, right? Like, once you're a brother in arms, you are a brother in arms. You fight and you die for your buddies, right? Going into the battle, a Spartan soldier or hoplite wore a large bronze helmet. So the movie got that right. They had a armored breastplate. That's where I had the most beef with the movie, right? One of the things that made the Spartans so fantastic as far as their art of war was they were using bronze armor when the rest of the Persians were still using, the typical tin and stuff like that, right? So one of the Spartans' advantages were they had the best shields, the best armor, stuff like that, right? So that's one of the things I had beef with. When you see the movie, you're going to see the Persians running out, and they have body armor. And I understand you want to show off Gerald Butler and his six-pack. I get that, right? But I kind of had beef with the fact that, yes, they had the Spartan shield and had the Spartan helmet and all that stuff, but they didn't have the Spartan body armor. There's no way they would have gone into battle just running around half naked. And I get that Gerald Butler looked good and had a great body and all that stuff, and so did the rest of the cast. That was my biggest beef, because one of the biggest advantages of Spartans was their battle armor. They had a huge advantage over the Persians, having bronze armor. And they kind of talk about it a little bit, right? Like their shields are made out of bronze, and that's what allows them to defend themselves from the arrows. So that part I had a little beef with. That was probably my biggest issue with the movie 300. But yeah, this is what a Spartan would have looked like, right? This is the Spartan battle armor. The shin guards, the breastplate, the helmet, and the shield, all made out of bronze. Now, their weapon was a long spear, and they also had a sword. Their sword was for close quarter combat. They would use it some, but mostly what they would use for spear. And you're going to see why when you see how the Phalanx works. All of them had a long red cape, which you do see accurately in the movie. And, of course, they would have that Spartan helmet with the vibrant red plume going on the back. And, of course, that is for the mental aspect of war. And, man, they looked the part, right? Like, I wouldn't mess with this dude. So it's kind of a mental tactic as well. So why was their armors and weapons such an advantage? And, one of the things I would think about is, imagine if you were going into battle. If their swords could cut through your shields, but your shields couldn't make it through their swords. That's a tremendous advantage. Their spears were bronze tipped, so they could pierce the armor and the shields of the Persians. So that's a huge advantage. It's almost like, that old adage of bringing a knife to a gunfight. Well, the Persians were bringing, copper and tin, and sometimes they didn't even have armor to a battle against people that had the best armor at the time on the planet, right? Of course, we're way before steel, but at the time, their bronze armor was the best on the planet. And by the way, it looks cool, right? Like, if you go back and look at it, man, that's a cool-looking armor. If you were to see it in battle versus, they're all uniform and stuff like that. So it made for really cool-looking battle armor. So now we've talked about the Persians. Oh, how heavy's armor? That's another thing too. I'm glad you pointed out. So bronze armor is also lighter than the other metals that they're using in the Persians. So it's not only sturdier, it's lighter, and you can see too it created better mobility too, right? So like they were already using so their armor here is not connected. So it allows for better mobility. Of course, their arms aren't tethered. So they're more mobile. It's lighter weight armor. I wish I was in class. I could maybe bring some bronze and some other metals and let you see it. But it's both sturdier and lighter. So, yeah, obviously it's not sturdier than steel, but we're way before steel. Yeah, absolutely. So let's now talk about the Persians, right? The Persians are an empire that would grow out of our modern-day Iran. And they called themselves the Armenians. Okay, so that's what they call themselves. And it's really going to be started by this guy named King Circe the Great. Of course, he gives himself that title. But it's a guy named King Cyrus. And Cyrus. King Cyrus. Bleh. King Cyrus is going to grow his empire out of Iran. Now, in 941 BC, the son of Cyrus was a guy named King Darius. And King Darius is looking to conquer Greece, but he didn't want to. He knew the Greeks were nothing to be messed with, right? And he kind of heard of the Spartans. So he would send an envoy to Sparta to kind of basically say, look, we know about Sparta. We know y'all a bunch of hardcore bad A's. Look, rather than us having this giant battle, let me have you come into the fold. I'm going to make you a great general, King Leonidas. You can still rule over Sparta. Nothing in your life will change, except I'm going to make your country rich. All you have to do is bend the knee. That's it. King Leonidas was not having that. So he would take their envoy and back him up to a giant pit, and he kicks him in and kills him. So that is accurate, right? Even the part where he screams, "This is Sparta." So he kills their envoy. Now, how do you think the Persians are going to handle such an insult? Right? That they send an envoy that basically says, look, nothing in your life is going to change. You're still going to be king of Sparta. All you got to do is just bend the knee to me. That's it. I'm going to make you rich. You don't have to pay. I mean, he's eventually going to ask him to pay taxes. But he's going to make King Leonidas rich, right? And he'll have all the supplies and all the forces of the Persian Empire. They'll never have to worry about another Greek attacking them, which, by the way, we already talked about. They want other Greeks to attack them, right? He's basically saying, look, you're going to have everything you ever want. I'm going to make you rich and powerful, all that stuff. All you have to do is bend the knee. And King Leonidas kicks his envoy into a pit and kills him, right? Now, here's the thing. King Leonidas was a king, but he wasn't a king like you think of. He still had his own Senate, and he still had to answer to the Senate. So he wasn't a king like you would think of, right? Where he just had complete control over Sparta. He still had to answer to his Senate, right? He's not a total king. So the government of Sparta would say, wait a minute, we don't want to piss off these Persians and get our culture wiped out. So the bureaucrats decide they're going to send 2 Spartans to be executed as payment for the envoy, right? King Leonidas doesn't like that, but it is what it is, right? Now, King Darius would decide, you know what? I don't care that you sent these guys. I'm pissed. I really was kind of looking for an excuse to conquer Sparta anyway, because I want to conquer Greece. So he's going to attack the Greeks anyway, right? He doesn't care that they sent these people off. He's like, I don't care, I want revenge. So he decides to attack the Greeks. Well, the Greeks would all band together. Sparta, Athens, all of them, right? They're all going to band together to hold off the Spartans. Then it gets worse for King Darius. As he's marching on Sparta, Egypt's going to have this giant revolt. They're sick of paying taxes. They don't want to do it, and they decide to revolt. So while he's going into battle, over here, Egypt's over here causing him problems. He's going to have to kind of like stop, so he's not on the ground commanding his forces. He's going to have to go back and deal with Egypt, and while trying to deal with Egypt, he's going to actually get killed in battle. All right? So that's going to make, and kind of the question I ask is, why do you think it's so hard to control such a large empire? Now keep in mind, we're way before Facebook and Twitter, right? Before the internet era. So when you give an order, it sometimes takes 3 months to get to battle, right? So he also has the thing too of like the Egyptians are like, well, he's off over there fighting the Greeks. Maybe we can fight and win our own independence. So what do you think? And let's go back to look at the size of this Persian Empire, right? So if he's over here, right, fighting over here, and Egypt's over here running amok, it can be really hard. I mean, we're talking about a couple weeks journey just to get over there. So it kind of talks about the difficulty of running such a giant empire is just the containment, right? You really got to have good generals, good governors to control that, right? And then communication, right? That's one of the things we talk about later on that made the Mongols so powerful, is they were all constant riding on horses. So they had the best communication on the planet. Okay, so Persia is now effectively at war with Sparta, right? That King Xerxes, he's going to follow in his dad's footprints. He's going to want to conquer it, right? Again, King Leonidas is not a total king. Okay. So, following on the footsteps of his father, Darius the Great, King Xerxes, by the way, this is King Xerxes. And I know he looks very different in the movie 300, but this is what King Xerxes actually looked like. He had his eyes set on Greece just like his father had, right? So he wants to go conquer Greece. Xerxes had a lot of problems still. So when he inherits his empire, he's inherited a lot of problems, right? Egypt's acting a fool. He's spread all over the place. He didn't have good people controlling this regions. So he's inheriting a lot of problems. So it's almost like not only has he got problems, he's still biting off more than he could chew, right? But he still has a massive empire that he's inherited, right? So King Xerxes still has millions of troops to call upon, and he will. He's going to march on Greece with what is recorded to be as many as 1 million troops. And that's unheard of, right? We're way before World War II or the French Revolution where we see these million-man armies. A good, strong army was 100,000, right? So for him to march on Sparta with 1 million troops, it's like, man, you talk about overkill, right? He's marching on Sparta with more troops than Sparta has citizens, right? Like way more, right? So that is unheard of, right? And his goal is, I'm going to conquer Greece where my father failed to conquer it. But here's the kind of question I have, and it's going to kind of foreshadow the problem. What problems do you think he's going to have with the fact that his troops all were Persian, but not really Persian? If you get what I'm saying, like, you know, he's bringing in troops from like all over his empire, but these are troops that he conquered. Many of them are just slaves. So why do you think that's going to be a problem when he brings them into combat against the Spartans? And you can probably kind of guess, particularly that part of it, right? These are slaves versus professional troops. How do you think that's going to be a problem? But I also want you to talk about, too, why do you think it's a problem that they didn't consider themselves Persian, right? That they, you know, the Egyptians consider themselves Egyptians, you know? So why do you think that's a problem also? So leave that in the comment section. Kind of curious what y'all think. And y'all probably going to guess most of it. Yeah, they hit Raby, first guy to the punch. I love it. They're not loyal to King Xerxes. They don't care. They don't care for the greatness of Persia, right? They to be honest, most of them hope they hurry up and lose so they can go home. They don't want to be over there, right? They don't care about the glory of the god King Xerxes, right? So King Xerxes is going to set sail, and Sparta, look, they don't have perfect scouts, but they know, right? You can't assemble a million-man army and not have it kind of be known like, man, these Persians, man, they're bringing it, right? So the scouts would warn that the Spartan government that, look, the Persians are coming, right? So Sparta kind of realizes, man, there is a giant navy on its way, right, with enough troops to wipe us out, right? I think the Spartan Army has maybe 10,000 troops to it in total. So, you know, we're talking about if Sparta's going to fight this army by himself, it's going to be an army of 10,000 versus, you know, 1 million troops. I don't care how good they are. They're going to get wiped out, right? So as the king of Persia heads towards Greece, the Spartan leadership did not see the Persians as the threat that they posed. They thought, look, Xerxes is going to ignore them. He's going to go pick out easier targets. Right? Now keep in mind, this is the bureaucrats. This is not King Leonidas. He's taken the threat very seriously, right? Yeah, and y'all, they're not interested. Great stuff. They're not loyal. Perfect. Okay, so as the Persians begin to offer other Greek city-states the same offer that his father had offered Sparta, many of these Persian states start to take the offer. Which means now they're not going to band together. Remember, the last time the Persians came, all the Greeks banded together and fought them off. Now some of the Greeks are bending the knee. So the question I ask is, why do you think they took Xerxes' offer this time? Why didn't they band together? And keep in mind, too, it's kind of obvious to some degree, but, man, that's a big old army, right? King Darius marched on with an army of about, you know, maybe 100,000. It's a 1 million-man army. I think a lot of these Greeks kind of see the writing on the wall, right? That like, look, we can't fight that. That's just too many. Let's go ahead and bend the knee now, We get to keep our empire. Our soldiers stay safe. They're not necessarily looking for that kind of glory in battle and dying on the field, right? So they all decide to kind of take the offer. So that's putting Sparta on this really tough situation that a lot of these Greeks that they were expecting help from, help ain't coming, right? Now, King Leonidas wanted to gather the Spartan army and try to rally other Greek city-states. He sees what Xerxes is doing. And he's like, look, before Xerxes can go and make all these offers, we need to go ahead and jump out on this and go ahead and get the ball rolling. However, they're in the middle of celebrating this festival of Carnea. Let's see, they didn't want to get wiped out, that's right. And they most likely wouldn't have won, that's right. They want to win in war because they didn't know they could win against the Persians, absolutely, and they're outnumbered. All great responses, right? So they're celebrating this festival of Carnea. So this is kind of like us doing Christmas, if you will. Now, part of this festival is it's forbidden to go to war during that time, right? So King Leonidas legally cannot go to war right now. Not legally, right? So for him to take the Persian army into war is illegal. So that's the first thing. Then it gets worse. They're celebrating the Olympics during this time, which, by the way, King Xerxes knew this, right? So now it's kind of like sacrilegious to go to war. So both legally and religiously, it's a big no-no. And King Xerxes knew this, by the way. So for King Leonidas to try to ask the government, hey, let's go ahead and go to war, he would have to break their own laws and their religious laws, right? So he's got two strikes going against him. So basically, in a nutshell, the government would decide, wait a minute, we understand the threat, let's send our oracles to Delphi. There's a lot of speculation that King Xerxes paid off the oracles, but the oracles decide to tell the Greeks to basically, no, this is not a good time to go to war. And I want you to hear what they told them. This is what's written. The oracles say, O ye men who dwell in the streets of broad Lacedaemon, honor the festival of Carnea. Otherwise, either your glorious town shall be sacked by the children of Perseus, or in exchange must all through the whole Laconian country mourn the loss of the king, descendant of great Hercules. Which, by the way, the myth was that Leonidas was the descendant of Hercules, right? So basically it says, look, you have two options. You can either bend the knee to the Persians, or you can go to war, but your king's going to die. Okay, so those are your options, right? So why do you think they refuse to deal with the threat? Why is it you think the Persians, they were born for this, why do you think they're choosing to deliberately go, see no evil, we're going to be fine? Why do you think they're not following King Leonidas? And of course I kind of explained their rationale, right? Their oracles saying no, the law says no, religion says no, everything's saying no. Only King Leonidas is saying, no, look, we got to go to war. This is for real. So, realizing that he would not have the Spartan army, King Leonidas had a personal guard of 300 troops, right? So, like, as the king, he had a small army of 300 of the 10,000 that were like his best of the best, right? Think of it by today of the president having his secret service, right? So this is his secret service, right? So today, if you're a cop and you make it in the FBI, and you're the best of the best, right? The best FBI, CIA, whatever, right? You get to be part of our president's secret service. That is kind of like what they are, right? So even then, he feared that knowing that it was against the law, it was against religious reasons, he feared that his 300 personal guard would not follow him into combat. So he's just decided, forget it, I don't care that I don't have the blessing of the government, I don't care that I'm not bringing my army, I'm going to go fight. I don't care if I got to fight by myself. I'm going to go fight these Persians, even if I got to do it by myself. So he decides he's going to ask his personal troops of 300, to go to battle with him. Now, he calls his personal troop, or his personal army, we have the Secret Service. These are the Hepis. The Hepis? And all 300 of them agree to go to war. And keep in mind, too, these are not... It's the relationship he has with them is not like a king lording over his troops. It is more like a brother in arms, right? So this would be like a beloved general who is considered an equal, like King Arthur asking his knights at a round table, hey, I know Camelot won't go along with this, but I'm going to go fight. And his round table is like, well, I'm going to fight with you. So they all 300 volunteer on their own to go join King Leonidas. So the movie gets that right too. Let's see, they let their pride get in their way. They're outnumbered. That's right, absolutely. Because they would make their gods angry. Absolutely. So y'all are all right about why Sparta would not want to go to war. So now at this point, King Leonidas is setting out to go fight 1,000,000 troops using an army of 300. Right? I can't even... He has to know they're all going to get wiped out. Right? So why do you think they followed Leonidas? Right? Knowing that all 300 of these guys know we ain't coming home from war. That's not happening. Right? So why do you think they would follow King Leonidas? And leave your comments in the comment section below. Now, King Leonidas believed he was going to his death, and he set out with an army of 300 to go up against 1,000,000. Okay, so it's 1,000,000 versus 300. Now, along the way, he's going to be joined by a few thousand Arcadians. So the movie gets that right too. And this is on their way to meet the Greeks. And I've already kind of shown you this, but I kind of wanted to show it again because I just love this scene. So let's look at this scene.
What is your profession? I'm a butler. And you, Arcadian, what is your profession?
Sculptor, sir.
You?
Blacksmith.
Spartans! What is your profession?
Ah, love it. Love that.
See, old friend, I brought more soldiers than you did.
And by the way, that's an actual thing written out of Herodotus. So, according to the primary source we have, that actually happened. Like the whole verbiage, the whole dialogue back and forth. What a great scene. I love that scene. Anyway, so he would be joined by the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians tell them about this wall that they have built at Thermopylae. So they're the ones that come up with the game plan. So it's kind of hard to see. But if you see, this is all like a gray area. It's all mountainous rock. So what they know is that the Persians are going to show up here on the shore. And they're going to have to come through here. Come through here to get to Greece. Right? And I wish I could show it to you better. But anyway, if you can kind of see it, this is all... They should have made a different color. But this is all rock right here. So they're going to come up and they're going to get bottlenecked. And so their goal is, we're going to make a wall right here. And of course, they could go around them, but they're going to build a wall over here as well. So the Phoenicians have built this wall, so they're going to bottleneck them right here at this little area right here. So even though they have more troops, the front line can't be big enough to overwhelm the Phalanx. That's the big goal. And I want you to see this representation. So these are put in perspective, these are the Persians and these are the Greeks. So this is the size of the armies that are going to go against each other, right? So the goal is to create this bottleneck. So even though they have a bigger army, they can't unleash the full power of that army at the same time, right? So why do you think this position helps the Spartans, right? And I want you to kind of think of it as, if you had, let's say you had 10 friends and you were going to have to fight 100, right? It would be a whole lot better for you to fight them 10 at a time than it would be to fight all 100 at the same time. And that's kind of what the Spartans are trying to create, right? They don't want to fight all 1 million troops at the same time. They want to fight them 100 at a time, 100 at a time, 100 at a time. It at least gives them the best chance at surviving, right? And I want you to comment too. Rachel said they loved and trusted King Leonidas. Yeah, Patrick says to die in battle is the best for them. That's right. Some of them are looking to get that glory in battle. This is what they've been training for their whole life. They respected King Leonidas. That's a great point too. They respected King Leonidas. This ain't a dude that's just coming out to give orders. He's going to go fight in the front line. And because they acknowledged respect that he was brave and strong. Absolutely. Okay, so why would they do this? To chip away at him? That's perfect. Not get overwhelmed, take them down bit by bit, cut down their full scope of their power, right? So before reaching land, the Persians will encounter some really rough weather, particularly when they go to land, like where they're going to unload their boats, and about half their army is going to get destroyed. So he shows up with 1 million, but by the time he makes it onto land, he's only got about 500,000. But I want you to understand what we're dealing with, right? We're still talking 500,000 versus 7,000. Okay? Not good, right? 500,000 versus 7,000, right? So the odds are still not good. Now the Spartans would set up their forces to create the bottlenecks, with the Phalanx of the Spartans taking the front. Okay, so all these armies are set up for the bottleneck situation. They got the Spartans out in front with those giant bronze shield ready to go, right? The Persians would show up, and of course, Xerxes is not sitting into combat, right? He's sitting up on this giant palace chair thing that they have to drag around. That's like, they kind of got that right in the movie. It didn't look like that, but the fact that he's got this giant chair that he's sitting on so he can survey the battlefield. And he ain't up in the front fighting, right? They would send a representative to Leonidas. That's 7,000 versus 5,000. That's pretty equal for the Spartans. I love that. So the Persians would send out a representative. And again, they would go to the Greeks and say, look, we don't need to have this giant battle. Just join us. There's no reason for your whole people to die today. And Leonidas is like, nah, I'm good, right? So the movie gets that right, but they get it a little out of order, and I'm going to show you that kind of exchange just in a second. That actually is going to happen before any of the battle happens. In the movie, it happens after the first day of combat. But I do want you to see that scene. It's pretty good. Why do you think the Greeks didn't take the offer? For me, I think about it, of course your guess is as good as mine is, look, they knew the stakes going into it. They knew they weren't going to survive. It wasn't about survival. It was about standing up for Greece, dying in combat, winning that honor. It was about all of that, right? So they have bigger things in mind. They're willing to die. They've been trained their whole life to die in combat. So I think it's kind of a lot of that, but I'm kind of curious why you think they didn't. So anyway, on the first day of battle, Xerxes decides, you know what, I'm not even going to engage in these guys in battle. He orders 5,000 of his archers to begin a barrage of arrows. So the movie gets that right too. However, these arrows are tipped with like stone and tin and stuff like that. So the Spartans hold up their shields and it's absolutely not effective. Their shields just block out those arrows. And I want you to see this scene. It's a great scene from the movie. I'm going to get to the scene where they do it. Oh, what a scene. Now, let me tell you this, too. They got that right in the movie. When King Leonidas meets with King Xerxes talks trash and said, our arrows will blot out the sun. They actually did look at King Xerxes and said, well, good, then we get to fight in the shade. So that was an actual line from Herodotus. And yeah, there was also, they got it right too, that while they're raining the arrows down, the Spartans were laughing. Like, you could hear a thunderous laugh and giggle out of the Spartans because they were just laughing their butts off at these Persians trying to kill them with arrows. So yeah, it was, they actually got that right. Now, the Greeks fought in front of the Phoenician wall and began to reinforce the wall with the dead as King Xerxes sent 10,000. These are like his crappy cannon fodder troops called the Medes and the Saracens to take the prisoners and bring them back before him. So he thought, all right, I'm going to send out an overwhelming army of 10,000 versus 7,000, enough to kind of rout them. And I'm going to send them out. And he said, look, try to capture them. Don't try to kill them. You know, I don't want to create martyrs out of these troops, right? As they start attacking the Spartans, they just get slaughtered. And so if you saw, there was you'd have to see the movie, but there was like a stone wall. They begin reinforcing the wall with the dead bodies of all these Persians they've killed. So it makes this giant, scary-looking wall of dead bodies. So how do you think this is creating a psychological advantage for the Greeks? Not only the fact that they're laughing at the Persians, but the fact that their arrows have been ineffective, the fact that they're now building a wall out of dead Persian bodies. How do you think this is creating a psychological advantage? So leave your comments. Oh, so let's see. Because their pride and what they've been waiting for, right, absolutely. Remember the rise of the Swiss in the late medieval era? Absolutely. They think it's an honor to die in battle. All correct answers. Okay, so I wanted you to see this scene too. It's pretty good.
Earthquake. Go, Captain. Fast formations.
Their troops marching were so many it started shaking the ground. And I wanted you to see their battle formation here. Okay, so this is the Spartan Phalanx. And I wanted you to see it in action, how it worked. And that was a quote too. Give them nothing but take from them everything. Oh, I love this scene. Alright, they're backing up. They're backing up. Getting their phalanx ready. And keep in mind, they train non-stop every second of their life for this. Here we go. Watch this phalanx in action. Okay, then the guy behind them, they spear, and then the guys behind them come in front of them and reinforce that phalanx with the shield. Push out, spear, guys behind them come in front. That is perfect. That's exactly how it worked. Right? It's like this. So they deliberately backed up so they could give themselves room. And now they're pushing them forward. That also creates a psychological advantage of they're not covering any ground. They're actually getting pushed back. Watch it. Reinforcement. Boom. Comes right back in. That is a perfect example of how the phalanx works. Oh, that was so great. So the Greeks would end up killing so many infantry that Xerxes says, okay, I've had enough of this. 3 different times while he's sending troops out, he would stand up from his battle, his little battle harness he's sitting in, and just be like, oh, God, what is going on? Why can they not break through this line, right? So his army is just getting cut to ribbons, right? the first day, it said that they only killed a few Spartans, like 2 or 3 Spartans, and the Spartans have wiped out like 10,000 men, right? So King Xerxes is getting really frustrated. He's only got 500,000. He has to conquer all of Greece with 500,000 men, and he's already lost 10,000. He's not made any progress, right? So he decides again to talk to King Leonidas to try to talk him down. I want you to hear this exchange. This is so good, and a lot of this is quoted too. I wanted you to hear this.
Let us reason together. It would be a regrettable waste. It would be nothing short of madness for you, brave king, and your valiant troops to perish.
And by the way, King Xerxes was giving him all these compliments too.
There's much our cultures could share.
Haven't you noticed? We've been sharing our culture with you all morning.
Yours is a fascinating trial.
I want to point out that quote. I love that quote, and that was from Herodotus. That King Xerxes comes out and says, "Look, we don't have to be enemies. We can share our culture." And King Leonidas looks at him, looking back at the wall of dead Persians, and says, "We've been sharing our culture with you all morning." Oh, I love that quote. That's such a good quote. Talk about cockiness.
Now we were defiant, in the face of annihilation, in the presence of a god. It isn't wise to stand against me, Leonidas. Imagine what horrible fate awaits my enemies when I would gladly kill any of my own men for victory.
And I would die for any one of mine.
Oh, I love that quote. And that's the difference. That right there, that's what I wanted you to hear. That's the difference, right? Listen to what he said. And this is what Herodotus said. He said, "I'd gladly kill 10,000 of my men." Leonidas looks back and says, "And I'd gladly die for any of mine." Whew! Powerful. That's why his 300 men were willing to follow him into battle. That right there. Okay? The fact that he was willing to die for any one of his men. Right? He did not feel like his life was of greater value than his own soldiers. Whew! Man, that's powerful right there. That's a guy you follow into battle. I love that quote. So, what can you gather so far about the mentality of the Spartans? How they saw battle? And I want to hear, too, about the mentality of their king, right? King Leonidas, right? That cockiness, but that dedication to honor, right? I love that quote. It was probably my favorite quote of the movie, of when King Xerxes is like, "I would gladly kill 10,000 of my men." And he looks back and says, "And I would gladly die for any one of mine." Whew! That's powerful, right? Okay, so in frustration, King Xerxes says, "You know what? I'm going to send out my best armored troops." They don't have bronze armor, but the best troops he had. These 10,000 troops that were referred to as the Immortals. Right? So these are his most elite soldiers he had. The ones that had trained the hardest, best armor, best equipped, right? This is his version of his 300, right? The best 10,000 he had. So what happened is, as they marched on the Greeks would use something called the feigned retreat, where it looks like they're running for the hills. As they do that, the Persians would break formation, right? It just becomes this giant running marathon, right? And then all of a sudden, on a dime, the Greeks all turn around and jump right back into that phalanx formation. Now keep in mind, at this point, now the Persians are not in formation, right? They're not slowly going up to battle with any kind of battle strategy. They're just every man for himself running. And that goes to the point of why it's so amazing to see the training that had gone into the battle tactics of the Spartans. Because on a dime, without any unifying thing, they all spin around, turn around, go right back into that phalanx formation. And they begin to absolutely just slaughter these Immortals. Make short work of them, just beat the bricks off of them, and kill his 10,000 Immortal soldiers, right? And you got to realize, too, what a psychological advantage, right? So if you're a Persian soldier, you're like, wait a minute, he just sent out the Immortals and they all got wiped out? What chance do I have, right? Like, they've already wiped out 20,000 troops with this 7,000 manned army. They wiped out the 10,000 best we had what chance do I have against them, right? Let's see. I love that quote. You're not chasing promotion. You're chasing to stay alive and chasing glory, right? Let's see. They saw battle as a way of life and a fight for honor. Absolutely. Their mind is built up and courageous and unflawless. That's what I want. Look, there's an old famous Mike Tyson quote that is one of my favorite quotes in history. They asked him why he bit off Evander Holyfield's ear. And he had this great quote. They're like, champ, you went into it with a plan. Why don't you stick to the plan? And he had this great quote that was so simple and so perfect. His quote was, well, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. I love that quote, right? The immortals had a plan until they got punched in the mouth. That's what I loved about the Spartan mindset. They stuck to the plan, even when they got punched in the mouth. It's almost like they enjoyed getting punched in the mouth because it just kind of got them going, right? It excited them, right? So, that's kind of the thing about the Spartan mentality. It's to be able to keep your composure, to keep your battle savviness, to keep your mind right, even as the carnage unfolds, even as everything's going wrong. You keep your head in the game, right? And that's what the Spartans had that the Persians didn't, right? Even these immortals, they probably never seen an army that could stand up to them, right? Usually when they came in, they just wiped people out, right? They'd never seen an army that could beat them. So, assuming the Greeks must be tired, day 2 rolls around. And the Spartans have been fighting all day long, from sun up to sundown. Assuming, okay, King Xerxes is like, okay, they've already had to fight 20,000 troops. Surely they've got to be exhausted by now. We're just going to win them through sheer attrition. He sends out another 10,000 troops, and this is where that endurance comes in. Remember, I told you it's going to come into play. Spartan men have been training since birth that not only could they sprint, but they could run a marathon, right? He sends out another 10,000 troops, and they get slaughtered. These Spartans that had been fighting non-stop for an entire day wipe out another 10,000 troops. So for those keeping it count at home, 30,000 troops have now been wiped out by this 7,000, and they don't look like they've lost many at all. Now, I'm sure they lost more than 3, but that's the account. Either way, they hadn't lost a significant amount of their troops to do any damage, right? So they slaughter another 10,000 troops, right? And King Xerxes is getting pissed, right? He's at a loss. He doesn't know what to do, right? Like, he's starting to think, like, God, maybe I can't do this. Like, maybe I'm just going to send in wave after wave of troop, and I'm going to lose. And he's starting to think, maybe it's not worth it. I'll just go home. I can't lose my entire army trying to fight these stupid Spartans, right? And then he gets some help. Another Greek city-state named Tachintion would have this guy named Aphiletes who would seek out Xerxes, and he's going to try and figure out a way to cash in. Okay, so this is where a Greek betrays the Greeks, right? And the thing is, how do you think Xerxes is dealing at this point? Right? Imagine you're Xerxes. You showed up with 1 million men. You're down to 500,000, and you've already lost 30,000 of them, and you've made no progress. You can imagine. I should have made that whole part of the next slide. But you can imagine how Xerxes is getting pissed at this point. So leave your comment in the comment section below. Now, Aphiletes would betray his homeland in hopes of riches and power. And he tells Xerxes, hey, guess what? There's a hidden path, right? There's a path you can take to come and sneak around and attack the Spartans from behind. And keep in mind, the whole battle strategy is keeping the Persians on one side. If you can surround the Phalanx, it's going to fall apart. And they know it too. This is not going to work. Now the Greeks know if they can come in from behind them and attack them from both sides, they're doomed. And they know it. Xerxes would pull his armies back and begin to use the hidden trail. And by the way, the Spartans can figure it out. They realize, oh crap. They figured out the trail. We're about to get surrounded. It's over with, right? They figure out what's happening. King Leonidas doesn't care. He knows they're about to get wiped out. So he says to the other Greeks, look, if you want to retreat, you can, but I ain't going anywhere. I'm going to kill as many Persians as I can before they get us. So if you want to flee, you go for it, but I'm not going anywhere. And this is a quote too. He says, no retreat, no surrender, and by Spartan law, this is Spartan law, and by Spartan law, we will stand and fight and die. Okay? So why do you think he chose to stay? Knowing, okay, a lot of these Greeks that have joined us in battle are about to flee. They're going to head for the hills. It's going to be just us left behind. We're all going to die. Why do you think he stayed behind, knowing it's for nothing, right? Like the jig is up, our plan has failed, we're all going to die. Why do you think he stayed? And I think you're probably going to come to the right answers, but I'm going to leave that in the comment section for y'all to answer. Now, King Leonidas would stay with his 300 troops, and about another 400 Greeks would stay with him. For those keeping count at home, about 470,000 troops up against 700, right? So it's not going to go well, right? And they're not going to be able to keep up. Yeah, they're looking for a warrior's death, right? There's no way they're going to be able to hold off. I don't care how good their battle formation is. It's just too much, right? So there becomes a big question of why did he stay, right? And I asked the question to you. Curious what you came up with. Warrior's death, honor. There's three big theories too. Of course, Herodotus does not know why for sure they stayed behind. But these are the three big theories. The first one is that it was Spartan culture. They did not retreat, period. The second one is that King Leonidas believed the prophecy at Delphi that for his kingdom to survive, he was going to have to die. So that's the second one. It could be, by the way, all three of these could be working together. The other one, too, is that he wanted to help his fellow Greeks out, and he knew that if he stayed behind, it would buy time for the Greeks. And here's how Herodotus wrote about it. No retreat, no surrender. That is Spartan law. And by Spartan law, we will stand, we will fight, and we will die. So that's the quote. And so he says, a new age has begun of freedom. And all that we'll know is that 300 Spartans gave their last breath to defend it. Okay, so that was the quote of King Leonidas as per Herodotus. So what theory do you go with? Now that you've heard the three dominant theories, maybe you think it's all three. Maybe all three came into play. But why do you think, which of those three theories do you think that you go with? So the Immortals now attacked them from behind. And the Spartans broke formation and just decided, you know what? There's no point in staying in the Phalanx anymore. It's not going to work. Let's just run out and see how many we can kill. And the goal is to kill as many as possible. And so at this point, 700 troops against and these are the Immortals, right? 700 against the entire Persian army. During the battle, the 700 troops managed to kill 2,000 of Xerxes' army. They also kill both of Xerxes' brothers, right? So they make it to that palace. They almost kill Xerxes. They get this close to killing Xerxes. But they do kill 2,000 men. They do kill Xerxes' brother. However, King Leonidas and his 300 die, right? Along with the other 400 Greeks that stayed behind. Now, what do you think about what the 300 accomplished? Right? Now keep in mind, they led an army of 7,000 that had taken out 30,000. 7 versus 30,000. Took out 30,000 Persian soldiers. Right? Then with 700 men, they kill another 2,000 troops. Wow, what a glorious battle, right? I mean, you talk about fighting and dying on the sword. Amazing, right? So what do you think about what they were able to accomplish? I want to hear your thoughts below. Now, when the Persians recovered Leonidas' body, Xerxes, in a fit of rage, orders that the head be decapitated. And it does show that in the movie. Now, I want you to understand, it was custom during that time that if somebody had fought a good fight, you didn't massacre their body. So this was very uncommon for the Persians, right? Typically, if they fought a good general, they wanted to honor what he had accomplished, right? Like to kind of honor themselves, right? To honor, like, look, this was a worthy foe. Xerxes didn't care. He was pissed. This guy had killed both his brothers. He had wiped out 32,000 troops. Why do you think he cut his head off instead of honoring him? That was kind of my question. And you can kind of imagine he's so pissed. He's in a rage. I want to show you this this scene from 300. Let me show you, because they show a good scene. But yeah, it was actually Xerxes himself that comes in and cuts off the head. But yeah, he's just pissed, man. He's throwing a temper tantrum. Yeah, they certainly got their glory. That's a great point. Here we are, 2020, and Mr. Waldrop is sitting here on his channel talking about the Battle of Thermopylae. Talk about a battle for the ages. They got their glory. They certainly did. That's a great point. And they earned the respect of history and of the Greeks. Now, Xerxes would begin to take out other Greek city-states. However, Leonidas had bought them valuable time and allowed for the Greeks to create a navy of themselves ready to ambush the Persians. Okay? Yeah, and that's another point too. They humiliated the Persians. They humiliated them, right? Now, luring the Persian navy into the Straits of Selmus, the Greek fleet was able to destroy much of the Persian fleet at the Battle of Selmus, which essentially ended the Persian threat, right? They're going to show up to Sparta and realize that, man, they got 10,000 troops just like those Spartans, and they're going to hightail it out. And it works. These 300 Spartans, with the help of 7,000 other Greeks, they do it. They save Greece from Persia. Which, go back to that other one. Let me show it to you. Let me show you that Persian Empire on a map. Yeah, I want you to see this. Notice they never conquer the Greeks, right? They're never going to make it in there. They're never going to make it all the way in there. So that, mission accomplished. They pull it off. This 300 are able to turn the tide. 300 guys saved an entire country against an army of 1 million. By the way, thank you for joining us, Mr. Wooden. Glad you could show up. Yeah, you're a little late, buddy. So, what are your thoughts on the story? What did you find most interesting? Were there any parts you enjoyed? Maybe you've seen the movie. Did you have a favorite scene of the movie? I'm curious to get your thoughts. Leave your comments in the comment section below. So that is going to do it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. This is one of my favorite stories out of history, is the Battle of Thermopylae. In fact, long before they made a movie out of it, my dad told me about this story. And it was one of those, it was just too fantastical. I loved reading about it in Plutarch and stuff like that in college, and reading about Herodotus. So it's something I really loved about reading about. So, and I loved when they made a movie out of it. I just wish they'd given them that battle armor. That was my only problem. Yeah, you thought it was epic? Yeah, me too. The Ottoman Empire. Yeah, we could talk about the Ottoman. That's a good one. Since you have requested that one, I will do one on the Ottoman Empire. Absolutely. The bravery and courage of the 300. It's an interesting story. Yeah, and it kind of goes to the point of can one man make a difference? King Leonidas made a difference, right? King Leonidas saved Greece from the Persians. Of course, we can talk later on if you want to about the Macedonians, but that's a whole nother story. So yeah, that's it. That's it for me today. If you have any other questions, comments, anything like that, leave that in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Oh, glad you enjoyed it. So yeah, or let me tell you this, and I guess I should put this in every thing. If there's somebody wanted to learn about the Ottoman Empire, I'm gonna do the Ottoman Empire. If there's another event in history, time in history, something else you want me to talk about, feel free to leave it in the comment section. When King Xerxes and Leonidas talked to each other. Yeah, that quote to me was my favorite part. That part where Xerxes says, "I would gladly kill 10,000 of my men," and he looks back and said, "And I'd gladly die for any of mine." Whew! Powerful, right? Vlad the Impaler. Okay, I do know about Vlad the Impaler. So I will add Vlad the Impaler to my list of topics. Absolutely. All right. Well, just in case you've not heard the beginning, send in those videos. I want to see how y'all are doing during the break. And again, as always, thank you. Oh, you changed your mind about Vlad the Impaler? You don't want to know about him? Okay. He was a weird dude. But yeah, so if you have any other things you want to talk about, let me know in the comment section below. And if you have any other questions, comments, or anything. But yeah, send in those videos. I want to thank you for your dedication to your education.